We are so excited that you have joined us, not only for this whole series, but in particular for this last week of Caveman. And today's going to be totally unique. You've been watching church in your cave now for weeks. And so we are broadcasting everything today from our caves as well. The worship, the message. And I want the message today to be, like 1/5 sermon and 4/5 cave conversation. And so as we begin, I just want you to think about these words. And we've thought some about this kind of stuff in the weeks leading up to now. But Romans 8:28 says this, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose." So that's like a very interesting idea, right? That God works all things together for good. And so, we've been in a cave. We've been in our own caves, and we've heard conversations all month about people who have been in some significant and are in some significant caves. And so sometimes it's really hard to know what exactly that means. What does it mean that God works all things together for good? Is that at some point all these terrible things in my life are going to work together for good? Does that mean that, my life may be difficult and suffer, but God's going to use this for good for someone else? Is it just this eternal promise that at some point, even if my life is difficult, that I get an eternal reward? And really the truth is, it probably in some ways means all of those things. And so we're going to lean into this idea today about caves and how God can use caves to bring good things, as we have a conversation with someone who many of you don't know, but he is actually the reason we're doing this series. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but I want you to meet a good friend of mine, Damian Williams. Damian, it is awesome to have you here today in my cave.
Rob, I love your cave, man. It's true cave. Everything is torn up. You're remodeling your place.
There's light bulbs hanging from the ceiling. There's stacks of wood in different places.
And you've been living in a cave. I saw your little hotel room downstairs.
Oh my goodness, we've been living in a cave since September,
man.
right?
I didn't realize, man. But you truly are living in a cave. Man.
We really are. And so you are like we've known each other for the better part of 3 decades,
Well,
right?
I say that you're my college roommate, but not really. You lived right next door, but it felt like we were roommates.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
And so really over the years, you've been one of the 4 or 5 people. Anytime I've had a major thing going on in life, if I need to pick up the phone and call somebody, you have been one of those 3 or 4, on the really short list of people that I've known and I've loved, and we've just done life together again for a long time.
You've been with me through these years, and especially this last year, man. Your friendship has meant so much. I mean, truly.
Yeah.
Good man.
So our story now has spanned the better part of 3 decades. But I want people, because for most people who are tuning in today, there's been a few people who have met you from New Hope. We've done a few things with Leadership League. But I want them to get to know you a little bit. So can you, we've been friends for a long time, but can you tell the people from New Hope, the people who are tuning in to our live stream, just a little bit about you, about your life?
Yeah.
So, kind of give that overview.
Yeah. So, Rob, I was called to ministry, so I went to Indiana Wesleyan University in 1994.
Yeah.
That's when we met. And of course, my background, I wasn't raised in church, but I became a believer through reading this Bible. I remember reading the Bible. It was a vacation Bible school Bible, because the yellow bus would come into our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I always thought,
and you lived in the projects,
I did,
right?
Man. I was,
with your mom. Your dad was
a
a successful businessman.
Yeah, my dad was a successful businessman, but I didn't have a relationship with him. He was very distant from my life. My mother, she just bounced around. She couldn't pay the rent. She was prostituting herself for real to pay the bills. So I saw a lot of crazy stuff as a kid.
You had caves as a kid.
I did. We lived in. Of course, I didn't realize how bad it was. It was just life. It was just life. I have great memories from childhood, but I remember when I was 13, just sensing. I didn't know anything about the Holy Spirit, but I really felt that the Holy Spirit was drawing me to Himself. And I remember reading the New Testament in probably a week or two's time. And while I was reading that New Testament, Jesus said that his followers would have streams of living water flowing in them and through them. And I remember reading that verse, and for the very first time being like, that's what I feel.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was born again, that I had begun this relationship with God, even though I didn't have the terminology.
Yeah.
I didn't know, like, he would have said, are you saved? Are you a follower of Jesus? I'd have been like, I don't know. But I remember telling my mom I want to go to church. Like, I want to go to church because this yellow bus would come into our project every week. And she said, we don't have church clothes. Because she had church background and she thought you have to dress up for church. Like that was her paradigm. Not like
New Hope.
Not like
you
New
do
Hope,
your
right?
t-shirt,
Exactly,
jeans,
right.
and
So,
whatever.
so she didn't know that New Hope existed. So we're walking down the street in my town, Newcastle, PA, and remember I just read the Bible and I had no church background. So like I'm like, Jesus walks on water, he heals the sick, he raises the dead, he casts out demons. I'm like, the Bible's a book of miracles, right? You read them, it's like you read the book of Acts, and so like the idea of not having money to be able to go buy church clothes was like not a challenge in my mind. So I remember, I don't know how I prayed, but I something along the lines of, God, like do a miracle, rain money from heaven. I don't know if I said those exact words, but something like that.
Yeah.
A block later, there's a $100 bill on the sidewalk.
Huh.
And my mom says that's the moment that God became real to her.
Yeah.
So we went to the Salvation Army. We bought clothes for her, myself, and my younger sister. We got on that yellow school bus. It was a Wesleyan church. And that's what began my spiritual journey and how I ended up at Indiana Wesleyan, because I was mentored and equipped through the Wesleyan church and met Rob. But I got to tell you a funny story about Rob. So I was the church, even though I wasn't church, the church that discipled me was very legalistic, old school, Bible thumping.
Yeah.
Like, so I was like every week getting right with God. Like I was like, oh, horrible. Like, and so like in my high school years, like I burned all of my Bon Jovi music. And
then rebought it again when you were like,
exactly. But my freshman year at Indiana Wesleyan, because one of my favorite bands growing up was Chicago. Like I loved all the Chicago's greatest hits, but I burned that music too. So I remember Rob.
It was Air Supply.
It was Air Supply.
Yeah.
I like Air Supply too, but I remember, because I had this legalism, I remember like preaching to Rob, going, Rob, you can't follow Jesus and listen to that music. And so you actually I think you crushed that cassette tape or burned it or something. So I still haven't replaced that, so I owe you an Air Supply greatest hits.
I told this story. You got the story a little bit wrong. We can talk about it later. Okay. But I told the story of this happening a couple years ago in church, and the next week, somebody brought me a CD of Air Supply's greatest hits. Hey, Aaron Hansen, thank you so much. Damien owes you.
Aaron, send me the bill, please.
A CD. So, no, it's awesome. So, man, one of the things that I just remember, we were actually joking right before we started recording this, how other than you having me come to your church plant in a suburb of Pittsburgh, 20 years ago now,
right.
We've never really done this. We've talked about doing this forever.
Cool. Yeah, this is fun.
But we've never really done this. Which is funny because when we were in college, Damien and I, when we were freshmen, we had all these big dreams. Nobody would let us preach as freshmen. And actually, people from New Hope, they know this about me. They know that sometimes I get crazy ideas, and I'm like, we gotta try this, right? We gotta do this. Well, when we were freshmen, nobody would let us preach, and so we would at night we'd pray together and hang out, and we would have these dreams we're going to set up tents in the campus at Indiana Wesleyan. We're going to get all the music. We're going to talk the music teams into singing for us, and you and I are going to preach a revival for the city. So it's crazy that over almost 30 years, other than one time when you invited me to your church plant to speak, we've not really done this together until now.
Yeah, man, this is a fun first. But the thing, even though we haven't preached together, what I've appreciated over the years is you are a visionary. You're a dreamer. You think outside of the box. And for me, having conversation with you always refreshes my soul, because it reminds me that God can do the impossible, and that if we just live this life of courageous faith and we allow ourselves to be God's research and development department, we see him do crazy things. And so I think I've appreciated our friendship, but I've so appreciated the way that we have dreamed together over the years, and the way that we have taken steps of faith together. And man, I never want to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Never want to stop doing that.
So you've been a pastor.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more just about like what your life has looked like business wise and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so 10 years as a pastor. And while I was pastoring, I just got so frustrated that we sit inside of the four walls of the church and we're like, here, fishy, fishy, fishy. And like, we reach people that have church background. But so I started thinking about how do we reach people who.
He's talking about people he knows, nobody who goes to New Hope.
That's right.
All right. And we're not talking about you guys.
But I just started thinking, how do we reach people that the church maybe historically hasn't been positioned to reach because they don't have church on their radar screen?
Yeah.
So that was one thing. The second thing I was thinking was I grew up in the city and in a poor neighborhood. And so even though I pastored in suburban settings, like I always felt like I needed to return to my core. And inner city ministry is really hard to finance and to fund. And so my good friend, Tunch Ilkin, who's an executive with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who also has a passion for urban ministry, we started dreaming up this crazy idea. We had enough faith, like kind of like back to Indiana Wesleyan and talking about putting up a tent.
Yeah.
You know, we said, well, what if we actually did a joint venture with the Pittsburgh Steelers? And we created a Pittsburgh Steelers travel program where we would take thousands of Steelers fans on the road every year. They'd stay at the team hotel. We provide tickets to the game. We have tailgate parties, motivational speeches. So we put together this little business plan on a napkin.
Yeah.
We took it to the Pittsburgh Steelers and they said, that's a great idea. We'll get behind that. So I don't recommend this. We launched this new company on 18 credit cards.
Listen, Rob Dice, stop. Kendra might need to use the paddles on you. We're not recommending this.
Not at all.
This is New Hope. This is not an FPU principle. Don't do this. But
No, only if God says. But so that was 2005.
yeah. Well, and I remember you and I having a conversation on the phone. I had a team of people with me when we lived in Michigan at the time. I had just landed in Florida for Exponential. And we were talking, and you said, pray that we get a deal soon, or we're going to have to close the business.
Yeah, man. For the first number of years, we lived on a shoestring budget and just got the debt paid off. But it was like we were always like one non-account from being out of business.
Yeah. So that was the early days, but where have you been in the last number of years?
Yeah, so things really started to break through in 2011, 2012, 2013. We started to strengthen our relationship with the Steelers. We became their travel partner. We acquired a company that handles all of their corporate travel.
Yep.
And then the Steelers saw what we were doing with them over the years and said, we want you to become our non-game day experiences partner. We want you to produce everything that we do that's non-game day. So 2013, 2014, we started producing experiences with the Steelers that became, at the time, the largest game day fan experiences in NFL history.
Yeah.
And so with the success of that, we launched with the New York Jets, we launched with the Green Bay Packers, we launched with the San Francisco 49ers. So we grew from a startup in 2005 through 2011, kind of living like paycheck to paycheck. 2012, 13, we started having breakthrough and the vision started to become a reality, that we were creating this company that was having impact in the marketplace. And you've seen it. You've been on some of these events where it's secular. The whole room is filled with non-believers, whether it's a leadership conference or a cruise ship with 2,000 fans. And we're also like sprinkling in the gospel in non-threatening ways.
Yeah. Well, and I remember being on the 49ers cruise and us on a very cold, windy day, being on that upper deck, baptizing people on the 49ers cruise.
Yeah. So I feel like last, 14, 15 years, God has kind of moved me outside of the church, and I've sort of been this practitioner of what it looks like to expand the kingdom outside of the church, but also to, create funding streams to help plant churches and support, nonprofit ministries. So it's been a crazy run.
Obviously you've been generous to me and my family over the years. I remember Christopher and I going on the inaugural Steelers cruise, and Antoine Randall L. helped Christopher. He taught him. He took him aside and shooting baskets. I have pictures of that still, which is awesome. And we went on the 49ers cruise, the first one last year, which was very, very cool, being a lifelong 49ers fan. Let me just ask you this before we sort of turn the corner. You went from living paycheck to paycheck. So like in recent years, how much money has come into leadership? Can I ask that question? Is that an inappropriate question?
We became kind of a mid-market size. Our budget the last number of years has been, a $7 to $10 million budget.
Okay.
And since 2014, we've been able to make, $1.4 million of investments into nonprofits.
That's cool.
So that has been cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So people are probably wondering at this point, how in the world did a Caveman series get birthed? Here's Damien talking about, hey, starting a business, and it's been, it was tough in the early days, but, millions of dollars, being able to invest, cool stuff. But how in the world does this sound like a cave, and why in the world did a Caveman series get birthed out of you and I hanging out in early July when you came over here to visit for a few days? So talk about what were some of the circumstances around the beginning of this idea for the series?
Yeah, so it's interesting because in 2017, 18, I was feeling like God was saying, okay, now take your experience of being a missionary in the marketplace and take that experience and begin to equip and train other people how to do that. So I felt like I was moving into a new season. I was feeling on top of the world. Hey, I'm actually showing people what it looks like to do, if you own a business or you work at a company, how you can actually do ministry through your work.
Yeah.
So I was getting really, really passionate about that message. But
So you're on top of the world.
I'm on top of
your
the world.
business is successful. We've stayed at your house a number of times. Your house is a big, beautiful house, right?
A lot of what I would call false identity. It's interesting. Even though I had a genuine relationship with God, but going from college to starting churches and then starting Leadership League, man, I was going 100 miles per hour. And my marriage was 80 to 90% revolved around work.
Yeah.
Okay. And there were just so many things in my life that, going back to my childhood, that I didn't slow down long enough to lean into and to deal with. I had a lot of baggage, obviously growing up in the hood, growing up without a dad. I was, quote, a very successful ministry leader, a very, very successful, quote, business owner. But I failed miserably, as a husband. And, over a year ago, my wife of 23 years now, she decided to leave. And she said, it's over, I can't live with you anymore. And it was very stunning to me.
That was just after we all hung out in the 49ers.
Yeah, it was. And I felt, and I was actually getting ready to finish this book, The 10X Leader, How to Be a Daniel in Babylon. I just felt like if you would have asked me in, months before that happened, if that was even a possibility. Yeah, that was the beginning for me of going into a very, very, very dark cave.
Yeah.
Very, very dark.
Well, and I remember because we connected in late June after me trying to call you probably for weeks or months, and you were I had no idea any of this was going on.
Yeah.
We talked in late June, and then early July you came over here.
Yeah.
Right, and when I took you to see all the different sites around Loudonville, and we were hiking with Liam, and we were at the base of the dam.
Yes.
And you shared with me a blog post that you had written but not posted about David and his mighty men hiding out in the cave at Adullam, which is what we've been talking about, right, this whole month. And I remember reading it and going, we got to do an Easter series called Caveman. That night, sitting at my old house, I built the graphic for this series, right? And I remember because you journeyed with me, mostly over the phone, but you journeyed with me when Bethany and I were in a tough spot.
Yeah.
And so I remember you and I having conversations, and you and Bethany and I having conversations in early July where we were praying and believing that this dark cave that you were in was going to get better, right? That just like you did for Bethany and I, you were going to go from not good to good. That Annie was going to decide, hey.
Yeah.
And so here we are now, 8-9 months later, and is the cave any better?
No, it's actually, since we were together in July, it got 10 times worse. Prior to Annie separating, our daughter kind of moved into a season of rebellion where she was not talking to Annie or myself, and rushed into a relationship, got engaged against both of our desires. And so this past, fall, she got married, and no one on either side of our family was invited to the wedding.
Ugh.
And so I've been dealing with the pain of not having a connection with our daughter. She's been very distant from both of us. So, this past year for me has just been that feeling of losing the most important aspect of your life, which is your family.
Yeah.
I truly, truly valued my marriage, loved the kids, but living in this reality of just watching that all blow up has been just, words can't describe it. And actually, if I could go back 20 years, what I would realize is that doing things for God, doing ministry, building great things, being a visionary, those are all really good things.
Yeah.
Those are, but when you're in a cave like I've been in this past year, you realize that the most important thing in life really is your relationships.
Mm.
It's not the hills that you're climbing. It's not the mountains that you're taking.
Yeah.
And so there's been a real, for me, just a sense of, almost, I felt some respects like I'm, that kid back in the projects again, and I've lost everything. I've lost everything because truly, it doesn't really matter, what your ministry looks like or what your business looks like. When your wife of 22, 23 years looks you in the eye and says, I don't love you anymore, it's over.
Yeah.
And then you're not talking with one of your kids.
Yeah.
Words can't describe how painful that is.
Yeah.
It's a cave, truly a cave, losing your family.
Yeah. So I still remember when Jericho was born.
Yeah.
I remember, just many points. Again, we've been friends forever, way before we had kids. So I know how much you love Jericho and Marcus.
Yeah.
I've known Annie forever, love her to death.
She's awesome. She's a great woman.
And that went from separation to filed for divorce.
Correct.
So, and you're right. Again, and maybe you and I have actually hung out even a little more this year than we typically have in years past, even as great friends who talk quite frequently. There's these lessons that we learn even in really difficult things about our important relationships matter.
I wish that I would have had this cave years ago. The cave is not a bad place. Now, let me say it's been a very painful place.
Yeah.
And so, would I sign up for this pain? No way.
Yeah.
This pain sucks.
Yeah.
But the things that have happened in my heart, the transformations that I'm experiencing now, this has been the pathway.
Yeah.
It's almost like God saying, for me to design you or to remake you into the man that I want you to be, this is the requirement. Back to what you were saying, all things work together for good for those who love God, for those who are called according to his purpose. And so God does his best work in caves.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've told people, especially with relationship struggles, to stay in the cave, to hang on, to fight.
Yeah.
And most of the time people give up prematurely because they don't want to be in the cave, so they just cash out and they wind up in future caves and all that kind of stuff. So, Damien, so here's the thing. We know this, you've been a pastor, I'm a pastor. So, when we're not in caves, church people, our tendency is we go to church, we tune into church, and we think, hey, tell me something I haven't heard yet about the Bible, right? But for those who are tuning in today, I'm sure they're wondering, for those of you who are actually in a cave right now, right? It's dark, it's deep, and it might seem trivial compared to some of the things you've heard this month that we're talking about today. Or for you, your cave may seem deeper, darker, and even more serious. So when we're in caves, we're not so much concerned with a new Bible idea.
Yeah.
What we really want to know when we're in a dark cave ourselves is God real?
Yeah.
And can he truly use this to bring good for me and for others? Yeah. So as somebody who's probably been through the most excruciating year of your life, even for someone who grew up in the projects and had a difficult childhood, what would you say to the person watching today who's what are you doing? Are you just self-destructing? Are you hopeless? You've been in a crazy, awful cave. How in the world can God bring any good from this? What would you say to people who are wondering that?
Yeah, and those are great questions. And it's hard to give answers to questions like that because everyone's cave is different, right? And I think one of the things that I've learned over this past year is to never discount the pain of the cave. Even if someone describes their cave experience, and the truth is someone always has it worse. I looked at my life over this past year and I'm like, dang it, stop whining. There's people have it, like people are starving in Africa or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But the reality is no matter what cave we're in, like my cave's my cave. Like your cave is your cave. It's very real and it really hurts.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but for me, what I can say, the uniqueness of my cave, I was an athlete as a kid. I was smart. And so I think for me, I always learned how to compensate for the insecurities or the broken places in me by getting things done at a high level, being performance oriented. The biggest lesson that I've learned, and there's many lessons I could tell you, 5, 6, 7 big lessons that I've learned over this past year. The biggest lesson that I've learned as a kid who grew up without a dad is that God is not looking for warriors. Although God did send many mighty warriors to David while he was in his cave.
Yeah.
But why was David a man after God's own heart? So I've been reading these 3 Psalms all year, these Psalms that David wrote when he was in the cave. And even though David was a king, he was a warrior, a mighty warrior himself, his expressions to God, when we talk about just a love affair with God, a man of poetry, a man of intimate connection with God. And so the biggest thing that's changed in me is I realize that God doesn't want a warrior. God is not looking for a performer. God wants a son. God wants a daughter. And so for the very first time in my life, really just appreciating his presence. Okay, so worship means, and that thing I would say, if you're going through a cave, the most important thing that we can do is just really, really learn how to experience him as Father.
Yeah.
To experience him as shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. To experience him as pastor. No, I don't think of myself as, we always joke and say, I'm more of an apostolic leader. I'm more of a, take the mountain kind of person. I'm not like a high mercy person. That's historically been the case, but let me tell you, now
your mercy's grown, right? Leaps and bounds.
my mercy, I'm feeling, and that God is a warrior. So I'm not saying that getting stuff done isn't important, but God is a shepherd, and God is merciful, and so I'm learning how to experience all aspects of who God is, and appreciating Him for who He really is, and you don't realize that He is sufficient. And I know this sounds like Bible versey, but all year long I've been like, do I really believe what I believe? Is God really all I need? If everything is stripped from me, if money and fame and success and family, and if all of that is stripped away, the question that I've been asking myself over and over and over again is, do I really believe that He's real? So the cave creates a moment for us. The cave creates this moment. God, you are who you say you really are. Yeah, I know you've been doing this song.
Yeah.
That is who you are. Waymaker, right?
Yeah.
I love that song.
Yeah.
It's that is who you are. And I think to be able to say those words and to worship from your heart that Waymaker song in a cave time, is there anything more powerful than that?
Yeah.
So that's been the biggest line. Just becoming a son, just learning how to worship for real, learning how to experience Him without thinking that, He's proud of me based on what I'm getting done for Him.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds cliche, but it's what God wants more than anything else is He just wants us to enjoy being with Him.
Yeah.
Because He enjoys being with us, and He just wants. And when you're in a cave and you're lonely and your life really, really sucks, you're like, God, I'm hurting so bad right now that I just need to experience your presence.
You know, it's interesting. I look like a caveman. Even though you knew we were going to do this, you shaved because you looked way more like a caveman
A few days
you know,
ago.
a few days ago.
I had no haircut for a long time.
But, you know, I'm sure there were points this last year as you were asking that question, do I really believe what I say, what I thought I believed, that God is sufficient? You know, again, just like briefly, if someone's like in that moment and because we do, right? When we're in the cave, we want to get out of the cave. We don't want to experience the pain, which is why people choose destructive behaviors or do whatever, or even like bail on things. They're in trouble, they're in debt, they're discontent, right? Like the people that came to David's cave. How have you answered that question? Like,
I think the first thing, the shift from warrior to son is an important shift, because when you think about a warrior, like, because I work with NFL athletes, and I've done some work with governmental leaders. If you're a warrior, you just take your assignment. There's no emotion in that. Like when the general says, when the head coach says, that's what you do. Well, being a son is a lot different. Like, you don't say to the general, I'm not feeling it today. So the general's like, get on the field, right? Shut your mouth, kind of thing. But like, when you realize God is Father, you realize that, first of all, like, he can handle you cussing at him. He can handle a pity party. He can handle you crying. He can handle your frustration. He can handle your lack of faith. He can handle your depression. And so there's just something really refreshing about understanding that God wants us to be real with him. He wants us to really crack our ribs and share these emotions with him, and that he's not afraid of that. In fact, he loves that. He loves when his children, just like we love when our children are honest with us. Like he can handle that. So that's been a big learning for me. Is just learning how and just allowing parts of me that maybe I locked up for a lot of years. As just a mental toughness kind of person, an athlete, business person, unlocking maybe what I would call some of the soft sides of me. People are like, what's happened to Damien? He's like Mr. Softy now.
it's a good thing you're not wearing a pink shirt, though.
That's true.
That's crossing the line.
We can't take this too far. Right?
Hey, Damien, thanks so much for coming over here, and for way more than the 2.5 hour drive, for actually sharing with us in a sort of a deep, honest way about your cave. And I know as you've tuned in that you've appreciated hearing about this cave. And like we've been saying all month, I just want to encourage you. God does bring good from caves. God can bring good from your cave. But you have to meet him in the cave. You have to invite him to join you in your cave. And I hope today has encouraged you to that end, and maybe given you a few more thoughts about ways that you can do that. This is a lifelong journey. All of us are going to be in caves throughout our lives. Man, if we really invite God there, and we meet God there, and we experience God there, it can literally change everything.
Let me say this too, like one of my biggest temptations over this past year has been to isolate myself. But when you think about what God sent people to David in the cave. His greatest partners came to him in the cave. And so what I would say is, like, for people in New Hope, you're going through a cave, and I just know if you're like me, like, you want to like shut yourself off from people. Like, this is the time to really lean into the church. This is the time to really lean into saying, God, I need people. That's hard to get to the point where it's like, I need people, but I don't think we can't get through the cave in isolation.
That's right.
Impossible.
That's right. Brother, I love you, man. I'm glad we finally got to do this. And I think, especially once we're able to actually meet again in a large group, I know it'd be fun to have you come over and preach. It'd be fun to do some tag team things. Like we church, we had planned to actually this whole month do a tag team thing, but with us all sort of being stuck in our caves, it wasn't something we could do. But we just thought, man, let's at least do 1 week. And again, thanks. I love you. And let's keep living life together. That's not a very socially isolated thing to do.
That's true. Sorry, we messed up.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, guys.